Good afternoon. Thank you all for sticking out for the last session here. My name is Bert Jackson. I'm a jazz musician. I'm also with the Cape Cod Technology Council. I'm the chief nerd herder for the Tech Council. And I'm really excited about this panel today called No Starving Artists. And we were talking about this at the Creative Exchange committee meetings during the planning process. And this notion that artists, we always have this vision of artists suffering and never having enough money, and there's something noble about that. Well, I will tell you there's nothing noble about that. And so in putting together this panel, the idea is that we wanted to bring together people who sustain themselves from their work. And I'm really excited about the folks that we have here today. First is Paul Schulenberg. Paul is a visual artist from Northeast Ham. And next we have Susan Blood, a writer, also the Arts Foundation Fellow for Writing this year. And she's got some interesting stories to tell about that. And at the end, Jay Sheehan, sound engineer, drummer, filmmaker, all-around creative guy. And I'm going to let each of them talk a little bit more about who they are and what they do. We're going to start with you, Paul.
Quick story or more?
Whatever works for you.
All right. Can you hear me? Is this on? Yes? Okay. I'm a visual artist. I always wanted to be an artist, like a lot of people say. I studied painting at Boston University. And remember at the time, people said you have to pick a major, and maybe graphic design or education so you'll make a living. And I decided I'm just going to go for painting because I love painting. I'll worry about making a living later. So I went through painting. I figured after college I would go back to school for 2 years and get an education degree, go to graduate school, teach maybe painting at a college level because that's what painters do. They've got to teach. So after graduating, I was a waterbed salesman for a while. And so I was a starving sort of artist. And I was married really young. While I was looking at graduate schools, my wife became pregnant and then came down with leukemia at the same time. So at 24, I found myself with a baby girl and no more wife. And I had an art degree that was basically wasn't worth very much, really. So so I was kind of a starving artist, but I had to make it work somehow. So as a painter, I could have said, like, well, I'm not doing commercial art. I'm not doing that. But what I did was I had friends who were commercial artists, and I learned to do paste stuff back in the days before computers. So we had knives and C-squares and glue. And so I did that for a couple of years. And sometimes we would hire illustrators, and I would do a drawing for an ad, say, like to show a client what it's going to look like. And then they'd say, well, we're going to hire a real illustrator to do it. So after a couple of years, I said, gosh, well, maybe I should just become a real illustrator. So I did that. And so in the early 80s, I started marketing myself, spending money to try to print postcards up and sending them to people. And I wound up doing illustration for a while, for about close to 20 years. And that was pretty good. I got to stay home with her, take my daughter to school, work at home, go pick her up. And it was actually a pretty good business. Well, I was fast forward. By the time I was about 40, I remarried. My wife said, you went to school for fine art. Do you think it's about time to start? I was doing illustration work, but maybe I should go back to oil painting. And so I started that about 20 years ago. And for some reason, people buy our paintings, and so so far it's working out. That's the story.
As Bert said, I'm this year's writing fellow for the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, which is I'm still just giddy about. And one of the things that I received with that was a Dune Shack week residency, which I just came back from, so I'm still a little like on shack time, and way more chill than would normally be. So I'm a freelance writer, but I also I write for various places and have various jobs, all writing related. But in 2016, I was approached by a fledgling publishing company about he asked me, the publisher contacted me and said, would you trust me with your writing, and do you have a book that's, in the works? And I was like, yeah, of course I have a book in the works. So then I had to get a book in the works. And a collection of essays, How Not to Do Things, came out last year, which was my first published piece, and that was very exciting. Let's see, what else? So I mentioned that I work various places. I've worked for Left Bank Gallery in Orleans and Wellfleet for 20 years. Like you, it was my daughter that put me in the position that I am in now, because I was managing 2 of the locations when she was born, and for a while I would take her to work, and I would manage the gallery and manage my daughter, and I did a terrible job at both. And Audrey Parent, the owner of the gallery, whom I'm forever grateful, she and I put our heads together and we created a new position for me where I started doing PR, and we created the website and doing more of what I'm actually good at. So that happened because I got to the point where if I was going to leave home, if I was going to leave my daughter with somebody and do something, it really had to be worth it. So I started getting into writing PR and doing more writing work as my actual job. But it came in pieces then, because it's Cape Cod and that's how we do things. So now I have 3 anchor clients. I have Audrey at Left Bank. I work at Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theater doing their PR, and the latest one is grant writing at the Fine Arts Works Center. And actually, it was, I just realized this, it was the Fine Arts Works Center, because I was writing grants, I wasn't scared to apply to the Arts Foundation. It was the first time I had ever applied to anything like that. But I kind of knew the drill, and the fear factor was low for me. So I applied, and here we are. I think that's all I did.
Hi, everybody. Jay Sheehan. I guess I'm probably less of an artist than most people here. I kind of think of myself as a technologist versus an artist. My basis of everything that I really do nowadays is sound production work, which I'm trained through Berkeley School of Music for. And I ended up going full-time, more or less, into production work, coming off a job that was a .com job. I did multimedia for them. I did IT, learned a lot of IT, and was able to still do the creative side with multimedia. And at the time I had gotten out of college, I had met my current wife, my only wife. And she comes from a very big family, 10 of them, and they're very talented. I know some of you know them here. So the middle son, middle brother, is an actor, and he's a Shakespearean-based actor. And after Berkeley, I basically went and worked for some recording studios, recording books on tape, doing some mastering for music. But also one of the things I like to do is work with film and television. So I got into the film side of things through my brother-in-law, who wanted to turn a Shakespearean play he was in into a screenplay. So we just went full boat into that, and that's how I really got into film sound production, which is location sound. And through the years, I kept doing that because he had a friend who had a friend, and people just kept wanting to make movies at the time. So Berkeley really was training for the studio side, the music side, with a little bit of post-production work for mixing the films and TV shows when they're done. So my location sound experience really started back then. fast forward a number of years, in and out of different studios and some other jobs. When I went to this .com and was doing multimedia, I was still doing all this other stuff on the side, and then through the .com bust, and a couple of years later, I made it through a few rounds of layoffs, which was nice. But I was commuting from here to Off Cape, Needham and Waltham for about 8 years, and had hit a point to decide what I really wanted to do, what I was going to do next. Did I really want to spend 4 hours in the car still? So then, luckily, right at the beginning of the summer, I got a layoff, which was perfect timing because I had no choice. They made it for me, which was great. And I had been there a little while, so I had a little bit of severance pay to last me a little bit. So then I just went full time into that, and things just started snowballing. And that was about 10 years or so ago. And here I am today, doing mostly production work, which is both on sound and video. And IT is now really my fallback, so to speak. I do it and I enjoy it, but I'm able to still do a lot of production work, as well as live sound, I should say. I do live sound as well. So I work at Cape Cod Community Media Center, who's our cohort here filming today as well. So I do a lot of IT and production work. But I also help manage and run a recording studio that's at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod and their new wing, education wing. So I was lucky enough to get involved with that pretty early on. So I'm able to help bring in people to use that facility as well. I've gotten into the education component side more again, with teaching teenagers and other kids and young adults how to do engineering. And what that allows them to do is actually come in, they can be trained, and then they can actually use the facility themselves, especially if teenagers in high school, because, hey, there I am. Because they allow kids to come in that are teenagers and actually use it for free, based on another grant program that they have. And very similar with the Cape Cod Media Center. It's a very short amount of money. It's $30 a year to become a member, and you can learn everything there is to know about TV production, some film production, a lot of sound production as well. That's kind of it. Oh, and I started a Cape Cod Sound School, so to speak, this past year. That's really just to give different types of sound and music, very much sound related education through different types of seminars, from composing for TV, live sound, location sound for film and TV. And it'll get into a lot of different other things as well, but that's really kind of a once a quarter thing, done as a seminar versus a one-on-one. And back to you.
One mic, we're all sharing. So, in a lot of ways, was anybody here for the last panel in this room? So I think in a lot of ways, this is very similar in content and a continuation of what was discussed in the last panel. And one of the first topics we wanted to touch on was treating creative work as a business. So, and Paul, I'll start with you on this one. Is in thinking about art as a business, does that compromise your art?
Brother. Well, that's a very big question. Let's see. I think your art can be inspired and sometimes led by the market. I think ideally you probably want to do whatever work you want to do and follow your heart and make it for yourself and personal. And there's a balancing act you have to do, because I met an older artist in P-Town who just said, never create art for selling. And because he just wanted to be pure, just a pure creation of his art, which is great if you've got family money, if you've got a spouse that will take care of you, because most people have to eat, and most people have to live in a house or somewhere. So For me, I've kind of tried to work with a practical approach to my art. So when I did illustration work, it was a creative job. And so someone would call me, like a magazine or corporate work, a book, and they'd say, this is what we want to convey visually. This is what the story's about. How can you create an image that's going to tell that? And I would try to do it in an interesting way, and like solving a puzzle. So I was working for a client, but so did Michelangelo. Michelangelo was working for a client, and he was illustrating the Sistine Chapel. He had something he had to do. He could say, well, I don't want to do that. I'm going to just paint what I want to paint. But he created this thing, and he had these parameters to work within. When I started painting, I just thought, well, I wasn't quite sure after so many years of not painting in oils. I thought, I don't know what I want to paint. So, but if I just start, things will start to happen. So one of the first things I did, looking around the Cape, I said, well, people paint landscapes, and there's an awful lot of landscape painters already. And I went down to the fish pier, and I saw these guys working on the fish pier, and I thought, this is kind of cool, and maybe I could do paintings of these guys working on the fish pier. And no one's going to want them, but I'll just paint these anyway. And then people started buying them. And then I thought, well, this is kind of fun, But then I have to start thinking, do I want to keep painting the fishermen, or am I just doing it because people like it? But so I just try to look at it as solving a puzzle. That how can I look at this in a new, creative way, maybe to make it a little bit different? How can I still have fun with this subject matter? But those are issues that every artist has to face. Is that you're going to do purely what you want to do, and also have a job somewhere else. Maybe not a creative job, or maybe you can have a creative job, but it's sort of tied to your art, and so you can do your artwork on the side if you have enough energy afterwards, or can you do your art full-time, but keeping in mind that, targeting toward a specific, market that's available. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Did you have another question?
No, you just continue.
Okay.
Well, I just, what you said about having enough energy at the end of the day to do your art, if you don't do your art full-time, I think you're one of the, you are a painter and that's what you do. I piece it together. I feel like I'm really lucky that I have my creative life and I have my projects that I have taken on for me. But I also write for a living. And it's the same way for me, where it's like a puzzle. And I get to, when I'm given a writing project, I get to convey something for somebody else. And one of the things that I like to do in my day job, food buying job, is that I always really like to use my power for good. I really, the people that I work for, the organizations that I work for, I feel really strongly about them. I love getting the word out about people and places that are doing good things. So that's one thing that I feel like, it's my paycheck, but I also feel like it's what I do. I'm shining my little light however I can. And as far as having energy at the end of the day, I've sort of made this little weird social experiment of myself lately. And so it's one time at the Dune Shack, I did find out, you think it's like cleaning your house, which I don't do. But you clean your house, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna take this day and I'm gonna clean my house. No, it's if you can do a little bit, then you don't have to take a whole stupid day and clean your stupid house. But and for me, so I timed myself. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write for an hour. And I wrote and I did a word count and I was like, dude, I could get some stuff done. So it's not a whole day. It's little chunks of time. And then my next social experiment was, okay, I'm going to write for 15 minutes every day because I can't set aside an hour. I don't have an hour. So I would get to a point in my day and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna do my 15 minutes now so that I don't have to do it later. And it's amazing how much wiggle room you have in your day. It's ridiculous when you have like that 15 minutes, and then I would end up writing for an hour. But if I had tried, so there's ways to do it. I'm going on and on. Oh, but the thing about the do check is that I still didn't, I didn't write for 12 hours. I had all day to write. That's why I was sent there to write. I don't write for 12 hours. You write, you make yourself lunch, you go for a walk, and you write, So it was, I've harbored this, oh, when I'm a real writer, I can, do this all day. I still need things. So that was kind of a thing for me. I don't know what the question was, but that's good.
Yes, what is the question?
In treating your work as a business, does that compromise the art of the business?
I know, I'm gonna have to. I guess another thing I did not mention before, I play drums. I play a little bit of guitar, a little bit of piano. Very little, yeah. And I'm not a composer. I love listening to music. I can sit down and play a lot of different stuff. The other night I was playing guitar, just noodling around and came up with some cool little chords I liked. But by trade, I'm not a composer. I just got back about an hour and a half ago from New York City. I was at a trade show down there, and it's for geeks. Anybody that's an audio engineer might like to go, or if you're in music or broadcasting.
Barb was very disappointed that you didn't take it.
I know. I sent him some pictures though. But one of they have an exhibition floor and they have seminars and stuff all over the place. But they've gotten into having the manufacturers bring in the heavy hitters of the music industry that are producing and mixing. And they have them do seminars, and it's gotten to the point where you don't have to pay extra money to actually hear them or learn from them. And one of the guys yesterday was saying how he was a drummer too, but nowadays his composing is really using all the tools and mixing. He's a mix engineer. So he works on a big console and he uses faders and knobs to do the creative side for him. People like he mixes for Green Day and a bunch of other really big acts that you hear on the radio. And even though they make the music and the song is the way the song is, but there's certain aspects of creating the music and getting it to the public in the way that the band wants to be heard, and the mix engineer who's giving a little bit of leeway on what they want to do or what they hear to a certain extent. But he's been doing it for so long, and he uses a boatload of tools, and he knows how to process sound really well. So what I come back to tends to be when I'm dealing with sound and other people's sound. I want it to sound as good as it can sound, and I want it to be as natural and not forced. And you want the artist's work to come across the way the artist wanted it to. So for me on the creative side, as not work, actually it tends to be sometimes just pulling up someone else's work and playing around with it. And we got a new software, doohickey. I want to see how that sounds on guitar or drums. I'll play with that, manipulate that around. Also, it's sound design for film and TV. A lot of times doing sound effects. There might be an explosion, you can pull sound effects off the web, but it's more fun to actually make your own, which can be anywhere from explosions are fun, especially if you have a warehouse like the media center does and a file cabinet that's empty and you throw it up in the air and land it. you get some really cool stuff. So you can be really creative in that sense. So mine's more from a technologist standpoint with a little bit of creativity and even with the teaching side as well, I found myself having to do writing here and there to be able to put together a very specific curriculum in whatever venue I'm teaching in. Because a lot of times the average book that is already made pertains to a lot of it, but isn't specific enough to where the location I'm teaching in. So that's kind of where it is for me.
So I have a question. Can you all hear me without the microphone?
Yes.
Because I would like to make this maybe a little bit more of a natural conversation and having to pass the microphone back and
You
forth.
need the microphone for recording you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll pass it back and forth quickly.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes, we'll get to that. So here's a question for artists that is always the big question: how much should I charge? Doing a show, how much should I charge for that show? I've done a painting, how much should I charge for that? I've got a new writing contract, how much should I charge? I'm mastering somebody's CD, how much should I charge? By the way, Jay is mastering my CD, shameless self-plug for my new CD. Jay is mastering that, and I've heard a little bit, and it's going to sound awesome.
It already sounds awesome.
It already. So, Jay, why don't we start with you this time? How do you approach charging for your work, and how do you decide what to charge?
Put me on the spot here.
I did.
I know. I've been thinking about this one since we talked. It's hard. I don't have a body of work to really present to say this is how much I charge. For me, I really do it based off of clients' needs. It's Cape Cod, so we're not in a big city. New York City, they can charge a lot of money, even on a per hour basis. So I base it off a client's needs, the project. Some stuff I do pro bono, and I see how much time I'm going to need to put into it, what I'm going to get out of it. Selfishly, of course, it's mostly a marketing thing, but also does it help out community-wise as well. And then there's the far end of people that want a high-level service that for live sound, because I do sound for Cape Symphony. There's a point between you got to recover the cost of the equipment you have and have invested into, and also you're bringing a level of expertise to the plate. Now with that particular, I get excited. With that particular expertise, so to speak, and it's my background. I've been doing it for about 20 years, professionally trained and mentored over the years as well. It might just be pushing a button, pushing a fader up during certain things to help it sound better. And it might not look like a lot, and sometimes it's not, but what I have to bring to the table is I have to troubleshoot. If I don't know, if something goes wrong, and it's technology, things go wrong all the time, then I got to figure out how to fix it fast, hopefully fix it so no one else hears it, especially when the auditorium has 1,400 people in it. Doesn't always work, as we know. But it's a service that I provide, and if you want to have that level of service, I do have to charge a specific rate. Married with 2 kids, mortgage, so I have to figure out that baseline as well. But I try and do it to the standpoint of what people can afford, how much I can afford to do for, and go from there.
I've gotten to the point where I kind of have an idea of what, like, press releases, emails, what to charge for various things. Every once in a while, somebody will ask me for something that I've never done before. And Google is great for that. For, I don't know for artists how you do it, but there's like, for this, charge this per word. So if you can get, I've given estimates based on that. And then for me, because my plate is pretty full a lot of the time, I'll look at that number and be like, do I want to do this job? Is that a little number or a big number? And so there's kind of a little sliding scale with that too. And there's like it's like hazard pay. You add your hazard pay if you don't want to do the job. Or if it seems like a lot, but you really want to do the job, if it's like for, a cause that you believe in, or then it can fudge the other way. So that's but the first, I have to say that my first PR client really got an amazing deal, because I was like, oh no, how's this? And they're like, that sounds great. And 18 years later, I'm doing it like, I don't know that was a good idea. But what do you do?
It's a tough question for visual artists, as for everyone. When I started as a painter, I didn't know what to charge. I could look in galleries and see what people seemed to be charging for paintings, but may have been in business for years, and I was just starting out, technically, as a gallery artist. I've heard that there's a sweet spot, or there's people that want to buy paintings for $200 or $300, and there's people that want to buy paintings for like $50,000, $100,000, and there's not much in the middle. So, but there are people there. So, but I did start out with little paintings when I started at Addison Art Gallery. I said, here, some 10 paintings, do you think you can sell these? And she said, I'll take these and we'll see what happens. And we just started out kind of low, because you want, there's a painter in Falmouth end of Cape Cod, Joe McGurl, who said to me, do you want to get high prices and not sell your work, or do you want to sell a lot of work and, just keep painting? So I said, okay, well, I want to keep painting. So we started off kind of low, and they started selling. And this is basically what the market will bear. After a year goes by, it's like, it's selling a lot of work. I think I'll raise the prices 5 or 10%. And that's just basically it. Everything's priced by size, so that people don't come in and say, well, why is this 9x12 painting more than this 9x12 painting? They're both by you, right? You're saying this one's not as good as that one, and you don't want to raise those questions. So you just, everything based by size. And if they want to make an offer and negotiate price, they do that with the gallery, and she just says no. So we don't negotiate, because then people start thinking like, really, you don't want that much, right? So I've heard a lot of artists that their prices go up and up, and then pretty much the sales start drawing up, and trying to avoid that. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, of course. It was interesting when I was in similar but different story when I was an illustrator. There were some guidelines, and there was no internet, but there was like a graphic artist guild had a book, and it'd say, well, typical, like for a newspaper, this might pay $200. For a magazine, a cover of a magazine might pay $1,000 to $2,000. Corporate work, blah blah blah. It all depends on the usage, and if they're going to use it once, or they're going to use it 10 times, they're going to buy all rights, and if they want to retain the artwork. So a lot of times I would do a piece. They'd say, we want an illustration for a cover of something. Like, okay, and if they're not paying for it, I get the artwork back. So they're paying me, I can keep the artwork. Maybe I only use it once, and maybe I can resell it. If it's a useful image, I can resell it to someone else. If they say, well, we're going to buy all rights to it, that usually triples the price. So being an illustrator was really fun, because it was working out. The market for that has kind of dried up. I've talked to a lot of illustrators that I used to, know and work at the internet, and just people buying artwork or illustration is not what it used to be. So I decided to fall back on an age-old oil painting. Instead of going high-tech, creating things digitally, I'm going to follow a sort of a medieval business plan, working in oils on canvas, and so far it's working out.
Thank you, Paul. One of the things Susan said to me when she was talking about her fellowship at the time at the Dune Shack was that she felt like she was on the Arts Foundation's time doing that. And that was a motivation for getting things done. So Susan, I'm going to go to you for this. In the last panel, they talked about time management a little bit. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you approach the time management of your creative work, because you're doing, I heard like 17 or 18 different jobs that you're doing. You've got 2 kids, you have a husband, you have a house that you never clean, and I know you have a dog, so that something needs to be cleaned once in a while. So tell us a little bit about how you manage time and how you make time for your work.
So when I get freelance work, the first thing I ask is, when do you want it? And I can't, and sometimes I can take it and sometimes I can't, and it all depends on when it needs to be in, because I will not do it before it needs to be in. So that point, there's a lot of moving parts. So yeah, the great thing about the fellowship is that I have a year, and when I applied, they're really lovely about not looking like, here's your fellowship, continue being you, is basically what it feels like. So it's not like I'm supposed to produce what I've done at the end of the year, but I also feel like I have this year to do something, and I should keep on it and do what I told them that I was working on. And when I was at the Dune Shack, the fellowship at the Fine Arts Work Center is 7 months. And so while I was out at the Dune Shack, I was like, okay, day 1, it's October. And then I'd wake up and be like, okay, it's November, it's December. Where am I on this project? And how far along am I? Am I wasting my time? Am I on task? Am I, that sort of time management was really useful, just to kind of keep, in terms of a big project within a week. And what other time management? So I am really lucky to have these kind of 3 anchor places that I split my weekdays with. And I'm also really lucky. Marian Roth this morning said, she talked about the gift of being fired. I have been laid off from one of my jobs the last 2 winters. And the first time I was like, thank you, sweet baby Jesus, because I was trying to get this book that I supposedly had. So that really worked out. I had that winter, but then it's like, you've got this time. And I would go to the library because I was accountable at the library. There are people behind you looking at your laptop to see if you are on Facebook when you're at the library. So if you need to be accountable, I suggest the library. And so now I have the time budget of the fellowship. So I do well with external pressures, I guess. It's maybe deadlines, external pressures. I can't set my own deadlines, so that would be my tip. Find some deadlines.
What do I do? That's a good question. Time management for me comes down to splitting 2 kids between myself and my wife. And I take care of the morning time, and she takes care of the evening time. Sometimes she runs late, and I have to do the evening time too. But we get it figured out. And a lot of my work, when it comes to like live sound, is specific dates, and I just have to be there for those, and those rehearsals that we have to be there for. Sometimes I did a webcast series last year from a filmmaker up in Boston, and it was 2 pilot episodes. They pretty much had a hard deadline, but I had a lot of time in between, so I wasn't totally rushed to get it mixed and do some sound design for it. I could fit it into my schedule for that one. Other times, when I'm at the media center, I have my time there essentially 10 to 5, a few days a week. And other times I'll have, when we get music gigs, haven't brought that up yet. Bert's a good one to bounce that off of too. Is again, they're set times, and you have to be able to be there a little bit before to set up, and you're going to be there late to break down, and how you fit all that in. And on top of all that, who does the finances and the accounting for the business? So that's another thing you have to find time for, is to take care of your finances. So for me, it's spread around, and I really have to bring it back to focusing on when to stop with the business side and be with the family for a bit, and vice versa, and not get yelled at. And she doesn't yell. She's very nice to me.
I don't know where I heard this, but an artist, someone asked an artist, "How do you find your inspiration?" And he said, "I find my inspiration by showing up in the studio every day at 9 o'clock." So I've tried to follow that example because we all go through periods of creative block. We can. Sometimes I don't feel like painting. People say, "Do you paint every day?" I try, but Facebook, email, other things get in the way. But we do have to find self-discipline. I heard an interview with a musician on the radio, an NPR musician, who said, self-employed people don't get days off. If we're not working, we're unemployed. And that's kind of how I feel. Although we do also need mental health days, so we do take vacation time, get away and maybe go to art museums and galleries and faraway places. But when I'm home, I try to get into the studio every day, sometimes 7 days a week. If it's a Sunday, and maybe it's not the best weather, and my wife will say, "What do you want to do today?" It's like, I'm going to go to the studio because I like it there. It's my job, but fortunately, I like doing what I do. So, showing up, that's a good idea.
I think showing up is great. So, Paul, you touched on one thing. There's a couple of books that were important to me. One is by Stephen Covey called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And there's some very obvious things like begin with the end in mind, be proactive. And I think these apply to artists as well as business, and it certainly applies to the business of art. But I always resonated with the 7th habit, which was sharpening the saw. And when we got together with our group earlier this week to talk about what we were going to talk about, we talked about sharpening the saw, which is, what are the things that you do to have that step away time? You mentioned going to art galleries, or I know you just came back from Europe, and I'm sure there was some saw sharpening that happened there as well. So, Paul, why don't we start with you? What are some of the things that you do to step away and essentially recharge the batteries?
Okay. Well, not to make you all feel bad, but my wife and I just went to Italy for 3 weeks. We got back about a week and a half ago. So we went to Florence and Rome, and fortunately we both like artwork. So some couples might be different on that, have different ideas about how much museum time they can take. But Florence is incredible, just so much art. So that was very inspirational after spending so much time in my studio, or just seeing the same, landscape of Cape Cod, which is very beautiful, but I'm used to it. To see a whole different landscape, a whole different culture, these beautiful museums, and it just, of course, that makes me feel like I suck as an artist. There's so much good art here. I can't believe it. And not only the Michelangelo sculpture, but I saw the Bernini sculptures. They say, "Oh, he was 19 years old when he sculpted this." I go, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" So, but it was also very inspirational. I came back. I wanted to keep painting. Another thing that I do, I try to fit into my schedule. I'm better with deadlines. And not necessarily self-imposed deadlines, but the gallery has expectations and getting ready for shows. But on Wednesday nights, I hire a model. I have about 17 artists that come to my studio. We have potluck food and bottles of wine, and we play music and we talk. And maybe you've been there. So it's real fun, and we all paint together. So I know that even if I'm having a creative block on Wednesdays, that when the bell rings and we're off and running, we have to paint. We're all going to paint for 3 hours together, and so that helps me sometimes if I haven't painted. I get that done. I also know that on Monday and Tuesday I've got to get I should try to get a lot of work done because I know on Wednesday everyone's coming over and I'm going to have this other thing going on. But I find the figure painting is something I just do for myself. Like a musician might just kind of jam and just have fun. It's not a gig, it's just jamming with friends, and a writer, maybe just going to write a story for yourself or write in your journal. But when we get together for figure painting, I can do what I want. You can toss it in the trash afterwards, or hopefully you get a good painting out of it. But it doesn't really matter, because I'm not working for sales. I'm just enjoying myself, and that helps, I think, foster your creativity.
I went to my first writers conference last spring, and it was awesome. It was in Virginia, and it was just one day. I went so that I could see my sister and call it a tax deduction. She lives in Maryland, and it was wonderful. It was a day like today where I went to these, to different workshops all day, and I came away with a lot of really usable information and new contacts, and met new people, and it was great to spend time with other writers, which I have to say, I'm of a certain age, and I don't have my MFA, and I don't, I'm never going to fit into here. And I walked in, and it just didn't matter. I realized that those limits and those who do you think you are, I was putting those on me, and nobody at the conference was putting it on me. And just I could have left then. I was like, I'm cool here. This is maybe what I came for. But to spend time with other people that are doing the same kind of thing that you are, working through the same things. I also have a couple of people that I check in with. We have a little, how's your work coming? And it's separate from work, but it's still a little check-in, a little, hearing about other people's projects it feeds your own soul, and kind of reminds you that what you're doing is you're not alone, and that you're on track.
Glad you made that point, actually. The very end. I think checking in with fellow cohorts in your industry is really helpful. I do that a lot. A lot is through my time at Berkeley. It's a very, very strong alumni community. So wherever they are, you can always talk to them, even if you might not have been in their class or whatnot. Excuse me. But you can really get into what they're doing and how they're doing, and if they're doing things differently, what they're running into. It's a really good learning experience. Even locally, there's, as Bert knows, there's tons of musicians, and there's a lot of people doing what I do as well. But there's a lot of different work out there as well. So it's really good to talk to your patriots and find out how they do things and what they're doing in their world. You get a lot of information from it. One of the things I love to do is what I did the last 2 days was go to a convention. This particular one's down in New York every year, and you just get a lot of information out of them. Today is another good example, I should say, as well. It helps. There's all those different types of seminars. Not all of them are for everyone, but you can usually get something out of everything. And the other aspect of it is you start to sharpen your marketing skills and your networking, and you really have to, for me at least, I have to force myself a little bit to meet new people and discover what they do and try and make a connection. And it's not always with another sound person or video person. What I found was I would go to a lot of meetings that might be sound related, but I wouldn't necessarily come out with a connection to lead to work. So I would go to video meetings, and they need sound people, and vice versa. So you start understanding those connections, and it's a really pretty tight community overall. Even on Facebook has a bunch of groups you can go to and network that way. And the sharpening side, I think, actually comes out of a lot of those Facebook conversations between, so and so, something happened on set. Well, how did you deal with it? Things like that. But the conferences I love. They're always a blast, and they're an excuse to get out and go somewhere too.
Thank you, Jay. My other book that I was going to reference was The Artist's Way by Julie Cameron, and she talks about a lot of issues that artists face, but something sort of similar to Sharpening the Saw is something that she has called the artist date, where you take yourself out on a date and you do something that's fun for yourself. I mean, for me, it might be, go to Charlie's Music and play their guitars, not necessarily buy one, just play them. Just want to mention something, Paul mentioned the fellow who did some sculpture when he was 19. I would certainly recommend that for Sharpening the Saw or your artist date is that you don't look at child prodigies on YouTube. Why don't we have some questions? Does anybody in the audience have something they want to pose to our fabulous panel here? Amy, I know you must have something.
No, I'm looking back.
Harrison.
You talked a little bit about time management and how you kind of manage all the different jobs that you have. This is kind of for all three of you. How do you decide when to expressly just say no to a job coming up, or what factors can go into that? You talked a little bit like a hazard cost as to whether or not you actually want to do it, but what are the factors that expressly make you say no?
Oh, so the question is, what are the factors that push you over the edge to not want to accept a job?
Well, me first, yeah. I'm repeating for the cameras here.
A couple things. Sometimes people contact the gallery, or the gallery contact me. I have someone who has a photograph of their dog. Will you paint it? And it's like, no, I never do that. Don't ask me that anymore. So, I mean, that's, you have to turn down, we might paint well, but, I don't work from other people's photos, or I know it's going to look like a bad snapshot. It's not going to work, so don't bother with that. When we were just in Italy, I guess I was posting photos on Facebook, and I'm in a gallery in New York City, and the guy contacted me while I'm in Italy, and he said, oh, I had a great idea. In November, we could have a show of paintings of Italy. And I just said, I don't want to think about that right now. I'm absorbing, I'm going to museums, I'm looking at things. I just said, maybe sometime in the future, but I'm not going to be ready. I don't want to come home and be panicked. I just don't think, I knew that I could face it as a pressure, get more work done because I have this deadline, but I thought I'd compromise my work, and I didn't want to compromise it by rushing to crank out work, to meet some arbitrary deadline. So, those are all issues you got to weigh.
I don't stay up all night anymore. I used to just take it and I would stay up and get it. I would just do what needed to be done to get it out, and I can't do that anymore. But I do have a pretty good sense of what my week looks like and where it'll fit in, and I will juggle the Lego blocks to see if it fits or not. And recently, I also I'm a stringer for the Banner and Provincetown Banner, and I love the stories they assign to me. They give me the greatest stories, the most interesting people to interview, and I had to turn one down because I was going out of town or something was happening, and I couldn't do it, and it made me sad. But I also knew that I wouldn't do the story justice. I wouldn't, when I get to the point where I'm going to be cutting corners, that's when I know my week and I know where things will and won't fit, and I know when it's full.
How about from a value standpoint?
From a value standpoint, like,
If someone asks you to do something and how do you weigh it against, you mentioned before that you really enjoy the organizations that you work for, that you believe in them. So someone approaches you for something and says, I want you to write an article about running guns or something like that.
as I said, the editors that I write for, I think they know me. So I keep getting like, I'm mostly arts and entertainment because that has been my whole life. I have spent my whole life, weirdly enough, in arts. And so that's what I know. But I helped the banner with their arts listings, and I was like, Howard, are you doing a story on the Cape Cod slave trade? There's this talk about the Cape Cod slave trade. Can we do a story? Are you doing it? And he's like, Susan, it is not arts and entertainment. The Cape Cod slave trade is not. So I got like in the front of the book, which was very exciting. But I'm not sure why I said that. Oh, because throw your weight in the scale where you want to throw it, and there are stories that need to be told. And so, yeah, I'll if there's a story that needs to be told, then I will kind of move heaven and earth to do that. But yeah, that does take priority. I don't know. I'm really lucky. The people that approach me are all pretty much in sync with what I do and what I like to do, and I'm just incredibly spoiled.
Could you say that perhaps your selection process of clients over the years has eliminated the need to turn work down, at least from a value standpoint?
Yeah, Robert. I will. Yeah. I worked for some really interesting places, and I did the PR for the Wellfleet Beachcomber for many years, and it was hard because it was just the summer, and summers. I don't take just summer work anymore because, as we talked, I like life, and I have kids, and we're busy, and it's summer, and there's a beach out there, and I don't really go to the beach, but it's busy. Busy, but it's there, and I could. No, but like just summer work is hard. But the Beachcomber was really fun because they just let me loose, and I would send out these crazy emails. Like I could just be in my voice and write these. Like, this is what's going on this week, and it was really fun. I was sad when I had to let it go, but yeah, tell the stories, and yeah, maybe they are self-selecting. They're probably because of that. There are probably companies that are like, don't get her. She's a loose cannon. But
yeah, vacation. That's a good one. No, I can't. I'm on vacation. Because I'm involved in sound stuff, a lot of types of sound. It ebbs and flows throughout the seasons a lot. When I hit the springtime, we start getting a lot more calls for location sound for film and TV and documentary stuff like that, and live sound picks up for the summer season. But I also, and someone I've heard from a few people, no one here, never turned down a job. And I think at some point in your career that is something to do, especially if you're starting out. Work as much as you can. People get to know you, then you can start getting a little bit more selective on your jobs. The other thing selfishly comes back to money, because I have to make my end of the family at the same time. So a lot of times there's jobs that'll be posted on through Facebook and a couple other websites for mostly the location film sound, especially off Cape. It gets busy with our film tax credit. We have a lot of films and TV shows shooting, documentaries. But a lot of times you'll have production companies coming from LA, New York, different areas of the country, and they lowball. They want to see if they can get you for $150 per day, $200. which might seem reasonable, but on the showbiz side, usually those are 12, 14-hour days, depending, plus travel. And they say, oh yeah, we don't have any gear, you gotta bring all your own, and you're bringing anywhere from 3,000 to 40,000 plus worth of equipment, and obviously nobody can do that, so it just slims right there, and eventually they usually come back and start bumping the price up. But they also fish around, 2 other people open, someone else will pick it up. And it's okay to, if you have cohorts in the industry, other people you work with, because there's people I refer myself, I'll refer to kind of 2 or 3 other guys if I don't want to do it or if I can't do it, I'll refer out to them. But it generally won't be gigs that are really low paying if I know they're not going to take it. So it depends on a lot of factors for me.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
How important is having a following? I kind of know the answer to this question, sort of. But how do you know when you have one? As an artist, particularly for Paul, when you start out, in the galleries, start selling, maybe or not. I mean, how do you know when you have a following, and how important is it?
How do you know when you have a following? Paul, I think this is for you.
Interesting question. It was different when I was an illustrator. I would advertise nationally in catalogs and do mailings and just try to draw people. When I came to the Cape, I remember moving to the Cape. I liked it here, but I didn't know anyone. I just thought it was really scary because I was used to living in Boston, and I just thought, compared to Boston, there's nothing going on down here, and I was afraid to be a fine artist because as an illustrator, I was talking to designers and art directors every day. People calling on the phone, and as a fine artist, I'll just be alone all the time, painting by myself, and that's going to suck. So, and it's a total opposite. I mean, here I am, like with other artists today, and then every Wednesday I have people come over, we paint together, and it's actually a very social life we have. So I think I started out just coming to things like this, maybe meeting people. Once I was in a gallery, I go to the gallery a lot. If there's a reception, I'll be there. If it's another person's reception in the same gallery, I'll still show up and offer them support, and I'll stand by my paintings and talk to people. And people get to know the artist. We talked about that the last session before this one, the importance of not just the gallery doing a promotion, but meeting people personally. They like to say, like, oh, I have this painting. I know the artist. I met the artist. We talked about his process and how he created this, and people find that interesting. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of it is dependent on the gallery themselves to get people interested. And so you have a following that way. People walk up and say, "I see your work in the gallery," and they want to meet me because they've seen my work, but I didn't have nothing to do with that. But also Facebook, social media, Instagram and Facebook. Posting things out there. You never know who's going to be seeing it, who's going to be sharing it. So that's another way to draw people in. Very effective way to create a following. Do you have a following?
I have a following. I have a little following, but they're awesome. So I started one of the things that we wanted to do at the gallery was, we heard about these blogs that people were doing, and I didn't want to screw it up for her. So I made my own just to kind of try it out and iron out all the kinks. And I called it Trout Towers because that's the name of our house. It's a long story. And I just did this, and I like to write. So I just started writing, and oh my gosh, it's addictive. So it never dawned on me that people would find it as a needle in a haystack, right? So the next thing I know, there's like this community of people, and we're all reading each other's stuff, and I'm getting comment. It was really weird. But that's sort of where it started, and it was this organic thing where, and really kind of the first indication that there were people that wanted to read the kind of things that I was writing. And actually it was that type of writing that got me my first column. So putting your work out there and developing a following, as organic as it can be, it's a great thing.
I don't have followers. I got 35,000 followers. I'm just waiting for them to hit the like button. Yeah, like I don't have that kind of a basis for what I do, but I do, from a marketing standpoint, try and get as many as I can, because one of the things I find that it helps with what gigs I have, especially live sound and things like that, it just helps promote the artist that I'm working for to help. We might not have the same connections. At this point in my life, I grew up down here and I know a lot of people, so I'm sure we have most of the same connections, but if there's 5 connections that we don't have and they're on my side and I can get them to come out, that helps them, and in return does everything for everyone else. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering if you could each talk about or share phases in your work-life balance, or maybe times when they merge, when you were at your happiest, but also lucrative.
Phases in your work-life balance when you were happiest, but it was also lucrative.
Yeah.
Financially lucrative?
Yeah, so if we're talking about not starving.
Right.
So phases when you're eating well,
Jay, want to
but
start?
not just working and staying hours.
Start that.
I'm curious what the balance was, what the routine was that felt good.
It's like a hot potato.
Honestly, when we first started, when it first came up, no starving artists, I was like, do they want recipes? Because I can feed a family for so cheap. When I was freelancing, I was like, man, I had a budget. And but yeah, I think you find that spot, and it's a moving spot,
Yeah.
but where it's moving. That's all it is. And I think my husband does what you do, so we are both. We kind of go. We literally leave each other notes on the dining room table in the summer because he's out as a sound engineer, and we tag team. So we've sort of had to figure out how many acorns to bury in the yard during the summer and where to dig them up when the time comes. And I think that's, that would be my no starving artist part, is to figure out how to budget it so that it works, because it does come in waves. And, for artists who sell a painting and then you don't, or, for me, I don't know what I do, but, yeah, that's.
One second.
Yeah, I've always operated under the assumption that I'm probably not going to get any work, so I'm just so happy when it comes in that I've always lived pretty frugally, and squirreled money away. So, actually things are okay. Yeah, I think when things start, when you're on a roll and work is selling. Certainly it's a happy time, and you just keep, got to keep that momentum going if you can. But yeah, how do you keep it going? I don't know. I've always operated in the assumption that it's probably not going to. So, I think artists, no starving artists, you should be industrious and full of ideas and wear a lot of hats. I think that comes up in another one of the talks. Wear a lot of hats. At one point, my wife and I bought a house in East Orleans that was a licensed B&B. So I said, I'm an artist. Actually, I was painting, but I was doing an illustration still. We had a B&B, we could rent rooms, and it had a barn, so I could have a gallery if I wanted to. So I really tried to cover a lot of bases. But we never did have the gallery. We did rent some rooms, and then ultimately the house was too big to take care of, and it went against my law of keeping things frugal and simple. So, yeah, I think artists just have to wear a lot of hats and be open to new ideas, other ways of making money.
Yeah, there's a lot of ebb and flow. And actually, her husband, Chris, is one of the people we kind of have on our call list, so if I can't do it or he can't do it, then there's like 2 other people we call. But it's a lot of effort. So for me, there's been a couple that have been very lucrative. And what I find is actually those are the most stressful ones of any of them. The ones that are generally not very lucrative, I don't, for some reason, have a slightly relaxing component to it. I don't know why. But there's times where you gotta, I had a big job. It was one day I was really just a fill-in for a friend. It was on the film set, a major film up in Boston, and his job really wasn't that difficult. It was supplying a playback for a dance scene in a movie. However, I took his equipment and it all worked fine. I just happened to grab one wrong cable and the speaker didn't work for a long period of time. And it held the setup for a long time. It was lucrative in the sense that it was good experience, and it was a union job, so you got exposed to a lot of that. But the stress level was huge because I was the guy holding the setup. So things like that, and even when it doesn't go badly like that, it can go perfect. But it can still be very stressful. I don't know why. Usually on the film side, where sounds tends to be such an important component to film and TV. If it's not there, people will shut it off. They tend to, if they can hear it, but it's a bad-looking picture or something, they have a little forgiveness. But if the sound's bad, they generally turn it off. So. If the sound's not good and I'm getting paid a decent rate, then it's the stress level's up there to make sure it comes through. But yeah, so for me, the lucrative side tends to be the higher stress points, for sure.
So you've wasted another hour and 15 minutes at a conference at the Arts Foundation. I'd like to thank Paul and Susan and Jay. Thanks for being here. You guys are all on social media, so if you have further questions for them, you can find them there. I would also just like to say this is the last session of the day. Thanks to all of you for coming and spending whatever part of the day you could with us. On behalf of the Arts Foundation, on behalf of our organizing panel, I see Jackie and Ellen here in the room, and they're a great team to work with. Certainly the staff at the Arts Foundation, the board of the Arts Foundation for sponsoring us, and to all the panelists who are here today. I just want to say thank you very much.